dunia, antara punca utama yang akan menghalang perkara itu berlaku adalah rasuah. Dan kita juga tahu bila indeks Transparency International keluar, kita masih lagi di takut yang sama di tanggal 56
dia pergi jahit dia punya
ke selatan, ke arah Singapura dan mereka berada di tanggal ketiga teratas di dunia.
Dia pergi jahit
negara paling kurang
ada sekarang tanam semula
Profesor Dr. Michel Girodo, a very world-renowned expert in terms of assisting enforcement and law agencies around the world in strategizing their approach towards combating not only corruption but also other matters that include people. As far as how I look at it, people versus crime, people versus corruption. And when we talk about this, sometimes it's very, very subjective. We would like to see things and approach things in a very strategic manner, black and white. But when we talk about corruption itself in Malaysia, people seem to think that we are in a lot of gray areas. So I'd like to tap into your expertise, Professor, in terms of you've been around not only in the academic world looking at this, but also out there in the field with law enforcement agencies looking at things. 35 years with the police or authorities in Canada, for example, and you've been to Asia, you've been in Hong Kong and Singapore and a lot of other places. So if I can ask you just generally, how do you look at the fight against corruption? Because a lot of people in this part of the world seem to think, is there in politics, is there in business, is even there socially now? So can we really weed out, yank it out by the root and throw it away?
Well, I must believe that we can, because if I believed that it was impossible, I wouldn't be doing this work. But I'm quite optimistic about the fact that there is significant progress taking place. And we can talk about where that significant progress is and why it may not be materializing in Malaysia, in the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. What does that mean? What does that index mean? And what are the other more important indices that I think Malaysian citizens ought to look to see the changes that are taking place within their own country in regards to Malaysia. But I'm optimistic. There's a lot of effort going on internationally in identifying and defining this word corruption. That not too many people understand what it means. They know it's something that's not good. And on the other hand, they say, well, it's everywhere, and we live with it. And the corruption is the abuse of your own position for personal gain. And if you can think about all the times in the course of the day, you can imagine a public official involving in a discussion with a citizen. Imagine how that person has the power and the influence to use his position to get personal gain. Well, it happens everywhere. Customs, police, the various tactics that they use. And we've come to accept some of these tactics because that's the way it is. For example, in customs, the customs officer may decide to delay and slow down the process of executing paperwork on purpose, so that the client is invited to offer a bribe to speed up the process. Or if the client makes a tiny little error in the form that he completes, well, that's the customs officer's in for trying to say, oh, this is going to take another hour or so. Unless, of course, I can speed it up for you, you can jump the line, and that'll cost you something extra. But that's corruption, and because the extra goes in the customs officer's pocket.
The reason is because even if the official is not asking for it, it will be offered to him or her, and the offer is just too good to refuse. So maybe that's why people are a bit pessimistic. I know a lot of people tend to be good, but the moment the carrot is dangled in front and...
Yeah. Well, in corrupt acts, it's corrupt acts that are conducted in secret, and it takes two people to tango. There is the public officer and there's the citizen, and both of them end up by being complicit in this act. That's why it's not just sufficient to tackle corruption with one public officer, and he must also deal with the behavior of everyone on the street. For example, a driver. To give you an example, in Russia and in Ukraine, for many years, the fines for speeding were 8,000 rubles, which is pretty high. And imagine that. You're driving down the highway, and a Russian traffic officer stops you. And he says, I'm going to issue you a summons, and the summons is going to cost you, that when you go to court. Now, the thing is, 8,000 rubles is a huge amount of money. There's an incentive on the part of the citizen to try to cancel that summons, or else you'll pay a 2-month salary. So there's an incentive and a desire on the part of the citizen to want to offer some money to the police. The police officer knows this. So the problem with corruption there is not within the heart of the individual. In part, it's in the context in which it takes place. That is, the fine is too high. If the fine was reduced from 8,000 to 50, you will have a lot less corruption because you have a lot less reason to want to offer the bribe. But you're quite right. It does take two to do this. And some of the solutions, I can give you an example of in Peru, they were very serious about getting rid of bribe taking by police officers, traffic department. And they had a major campaign where they would advertise on billboards, no corruption, citizen, stop doing this, police, stop doing this. And the way they did it, that's fascinating, because the president was involved in this particular initiative. He said, I want you to tape record the conversations that are taking place between the police officer who stops you and you who's out there offering a bribe. I want to see which police officer is asking for a bribe. Moreover, they recorded the conversations, and those conversations were videotaped, and at night, on the nightly news at 6:15, the image and the video of the officer accepting the bribe was portrayed. That is not a bad idea. Instead of simply firing or fining, the naming and shaming of seeing you trying to extort money from their citizen is a demotivator and a very powerful effect. Now, that's the other side of the coin. What do we do with the citizens who themselves are offering bribes, because it's a two-way street? Well, police officers dressed up as police officers, but really undercover police officers, would pretend to stop somebody for speeding, and then see if the civilian behind the wheel would offer a bribe. Well, if he was offering a bribe, he'd be told, you can't do that. Okay? You will get fined if you do that. Stop doing that. The next time we catch you offering a bribe to a police officer, there will be a severe penalty. And before long, corruption rates went dramatically down. And the reason for that is simple. It's because you stop it at the level where the source and the parties are playing. And more importantly, we know that punishment works in stopping some bad behaviors. But it's not the magnitude and the severity of the punishment. It is the probability of getting caught. We know that deterrence against corruption works best when you have a system, law enforcement system, that lets the public believe that if you're going to mess up, if you're going to do something wrong, the odds are strong that you're going to get caught. So that's a model for reducing behavior, and there's a good reason to be optimistic. I believe that the traffic department of the Royal Malaysian Police is taking this seriously. I met with them over 4 days during my stay here, and they want to take this particular program forward and do exactly the same thing.
Very important to hear. As to go for the first considerate, Professor, but once you are back, I mean, you've been looking at psychology and maybe behavioral science even before I went to school. So long years of studying this. If I take that approach after this short break, how do we look at the act of giving bribe and the act of fighting it? Because there's this two maybe ways of looking at it. One is by saying that if they are